Yeah, and one thing which is quite interesting, it's not, I mean, we still miss, a few months, but in a few months it will be, the 50th anniversary of your first ascent of the Pilier du Frêney.
Yes, well, next September, yes. So
Next
2011 is that
next
50th
September,
anniversary,
huh?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that was quite something, quite a competition with the froggies, with the French, huh?
Well, no,
not for you, but for the French it was.
Well, no, it culminated in a very special year because, and in a way, I think one of the most remarkable and satisfying years of my climbing life because I actually left England in the beginning of January by liner to go to Bombay looking after all the expedition gear because in those days the cheapest way and the only way of getting all your expedition gear out to the Himalayas was to send it by boat. And if you sent it as accompanied baggage on a boat and then you just travelled kind of a third class, tourist class, it all became quite cheap. And so this is what I did. And then met the rest of my team who travelled overland and we made the first ascent of Nuptse. And that was by its huge south face, which I think probably in 1961, that was probably one of the technically most difficult climbs done in the Himalayas. Yeah. Well, no, I think maybe even harder was the ascent of Gasherbrum 4 by an Italian expedition in 1958, and that was an amazing ascent. But this was a hard, challenging ascent. And then we travelled all the way back from Kathmandu overland in a couple of... there were Hillman Huskies, which were ordinary cars, they weren't four-wheel drives or anything like that, and they were falling to bits by this time, but we somehow got back, and then I'd arranged to meet up with Don Whillans, who of course, I think is one of the greatest all-round mountaineers that Britain's ever produced.
He was a real character.
An amazing man. Superb climber. And anyway, Don and I met up together and we were hoping to climb the North Wall of the Eiger because no Briton had ever climbed it at that stage. And so we sat out the summer waiting to do that and we had absolutely no money at all. And then at the end we finally got fed up, the weather was very bad. And so we went across to Chamonix and wondered what climb to do to really recover a very unsuccessful summer. And of course the central Pilier of Frêney was very much in the news. Tragically, there was that big attempt by the Franco-Italian attempt.
Pierre Mazeaud and Bonatti.
And of course, I think there was 4 people died on it.
4 people died, yeah.
And but we decided we'd go for it. And already Pierre Julien and Ignacio Pucci had tried. Can you shush, folks? Hi, silence. Sorry, you can't talk in the studio.
Yeah.
If you want to talk, go downstairs. Right, where were we?
And Mr. Alpine Club President, shut up, please.
You didn't listen to Bonnington waffling.
He doesn't listen to yourself, and not even to a French speaking. Yeah?
Anyway, where were okay?
Anyway.
No. So anyway, it was a big objective, and
it was in fact 4 weeks after the accident of Bonatti and Pierre Mazeaud, huh?
Something like that. But when we got to Chamonix, we went to the L'École Nationale. We actually met up with Desmaison and Pucci. Not Pucci, Pollet-Villard and Pierre Julien.
Pollet-Villard.
And we suggested, well, why don't we have a joint effort on it? And they said, oh, no, they're much too busy.
Was Pollet-Villard with Pierre Julien when you met him? Because I thought you only saw Pierre Julien.
I forget exactly who we saw, but we went over.
But you went to see Pierre Julien.
We went over to see them, and we suggested joining up, and they said no. So then there was a pause, and I felt we'd been sitting below the Eiger doing nothing at all for about 5 weeks. I'd travelled overland, and the last climbing I'd been doing was in May on Nuptse. So I felt I needed a training climb. And so already recruited 2 more members of the team. Jean Długosz, a Polish climber, had been waiting with us in Grindelwald or in Alpenglen. And so we needed a 4th person, and it was a young British climber called Ian Clough, whom Don and I had never climbed with, but he had a very good track record, done good climbs, so we invited Ian to come with us. So Ian and I went and did a training club. We thought we'd do the Brown Whillans route on the Pollet-Villard, and when we got there, the Physio Brown, the wooden wedges that we thought would be in it weren't there. Someone had taken them out, and we actually balked. We didn't do that, so we went round and we did the Rockbrook Grappon Traverse. And during that time, Whillans, the weather had turned perfect, and so Whillans thought, well, you can't waste, you can't miss the opportunity. So he and Jean Długosz had actually gone off to climb the central pillar of Frêney.
Really, yeah.
And unfortunately for me and Ian, the weather had changed and they'd come back down again. So then at last, the team was united, we were going for it, and we set out, and the extraordinary coincidence, the afternoon that we got the teleferique up to the Aiguille de Midi, who should be in the same teleferique cabin but Desmaison, Pussy,
and
Pollet, no,
Juillet and
Pollet-Villard. Pollet-Villard. But they were having to go over to the Torino hut.
That's right.
to meet
but
up
that
with
you didn't
Pussy.
know.
But we didn't know that.
You didn't
and
know
he was
that.
there. But our plan was we were going up to the Col de la Fourche, bivouac, and we went up there, spent the night there, and then the next morning, of course, up the couloir, onto the col, and got climbing. And we climbed, and so that day we went up, to the bivouac, and we were all climbing well, going quickly, and the lower part of the Pilier du Frêney is just beautiful, nice climbing, and not particularly difficult. And then we bivouacked there, and then the next morning we saw these other climbers coming to the Col de Pertry, and we guessed they were Desmaison and Co. And then they'd catch up with us. They climbed the couloir between the central pillar and the right-hand pillar, and that meant that they could get up there quickly to catch up. Meanwhile, the previous night, Don had climbed up to from the bivouac, the chandelle. It's near, vertical, but there are cracks, and he climbed that, I think, with a bit of aid and a bit of free climbing. And then you come to what had stopped everyone, and there's a kind of a bulge going right the way around the pillar, and it's very featureless, and there aren't many cracks for pitons or anything. And so anyway, Don had got there the previous night, and then the next day, I belayed, we both went up there, I belayed just below that point, and Don led round to the right, and it was just a brilliant piece of climbing. And of course, I think these days, there is more protection there, but when he did it, we didn't have knife blade pitons. In fact, no, there weren't any chrome molybdenum pitons in those days, so you just had ordinary soft iron pitons, and we had coin de bois. But he got very, very little protection in. So he got round there and then brought me round, and then he led the next pitch. And Don was he was at the absolute height of his powers. And, I think he was, at that time, I'd say was probably one of the best, or the best rock climber in the world. Him and Joe Brown between them. Anyway, so he then led up into this next section, and the trouble here was, it was a corner crack leading into a big overhang with a bottomless chimney, was the only way to get through it. And his pitons were too thin, and his coin de bois were too big, so he hadn't got any protection for it. And at that stage, the French had caught up with us, and if I remember right, we called down and said, "Look, is there any chance of borrowing
some petit coin de bois,
pitons and some smaller coin de bois?" and my recollection is that they said no, they thought there was a route round to the left-hand side and they would need all the gear for that. Fair enough. So then...
But that happened after Don fell.
No, this was before Don.
Or was it before?
Well, I forget. Do you know?
You forget, yeah, okay.
I am not sure, to be quite honest, when all this happened or what the exact sequence was.
Okay.
But anyway, or maybe it was after Don fell. But anyway,
that's what Don writes in his book.
Oh, Don.
But, I mean,
I think Don. I think that would be right because I haven't even bothered to look at my book for bloody years. So if that's the case, which it probably was, so then Don did this, I mean, fantastic bit of climbing to get up into, and I think he'd finally got to a point where he'd kind of got his shoulders just about jammed into the undercut chimney. The crack now was thin enough to put a peg in, but he couldn't let go with either hand. And he certainly couldn't have reversed it. And he was about, I think, 15 feet above his last piton. And inevitably, you know, he's going to fall off sooner or later, and he did. And he landed out, I mean, the overhang is so great, he actually landed out in space, so he didn't hurt himself at all, and he was about level with me. And I'll never forget, he was kind of spinning around on the end of the rope, and the only thing he could think of saying was, "I've lost my bloody hat." You know, this her cap, you
his
know,
cap,
and then I had this terrible realisation: my fags were in me hat, and and then anyway, I kind of got him in, and I thought at this stage, well, you know, I might get some lead climbing in, so I said, well, I'll have a go. But I knew perfectly well that I couldn't lead something that Don couldn't. And I think at what stage the French said they couldn't let us have that was probably at
because
that point.
when they saw Don fall, they say, they are going to go down, and then they will take the lead. Because for them the competition was very strong. They wanted to do the first ascent, and they didn't like at all that you were up. You see?
Oh, well, that's understandable. But anyway, so anyway, they weren't getting loaded. So, and I then a couple of years before, and then the previous year, I'd climbed with Joe Brown, and Joe is an absolute genius at using inserted pebbles, because of course back in Britain, you know, we didn't put pitons.
Yeah, that's right. I climbed with them at the time, and no pegs. I mean, it was not allowed.
Yeah,
if you were putting a peg, you would be thrown out of the climbing club.
Oh, that's
and then you could end up doing a rowing or anything, or swimming, but not anymore climbing.
Yeah. So therefore, anyway, and I'd seen how effective this was. Yeah. So I managed to find some little bits of rock in the back of the crack, and then jammed them in, put slings behind them, stood in them, and I think it was 2 inserted chock stones I used, and that meant that I could actually stand in a sling and place a peg in the beginning of the chimney, and then I could lever up into the chimney, at the bottomless chimney, and wriggle out. And I still remember it. I mean, it is, I think anyone who's done, it's incredibly spectacular, because it is a bottomless chimney, and you're looking straight down, it's overhanging, you're looking right down the pillar, and you edge out, and you feel in that quite secure, and then there you get out to the point where you've actually got to pull over the top, and suddenly you're outside, and it's always, you know, you suddenly feel very exposed. But then, boom, I got out, and there's just the most incredible sense of elation that, you know, we'd done it, you got there, and that's what climbing's all about. And
even Don was impressed by your lead, because that's what he writes in his own book. He said he was very impressed by this leading of yours. Huh?
Well,
it was a good job. Huh?
Well, it was good. It was very satisfying. And then there was a ledge just above, so we bivouacked there, and we dropped the rope for Jean and Ian. It's been this had taken the whole day, and we dropped the rope for them so that they could prusik up the rope to join us. And it was at that point that I think it was, I don't know which one of the four
It was René.
Was it René?
It was René.
Who asked, well, will you
take a rope up? And I give you some pegs that they didn't want to give before. But we give you some pegs.
I don't know about that, but anyway.
Yeah, well, give him some pegs.
So anyway,
that you didn't need anymore.
Well, so we needed them for anchoring. So we did that. We left the rope. So they bivouacked that night below where we'd bivouacked the previous night. We bivouacked up there. We left the rope in place. And then the next day we climbed out over the top. So basically, and then they prussiked up the crux.
And at the top you were met by Paris Match journalists.
That's right.
At the top, huh? There were three of them.
Yes, offered us
they got you wine, a bottle of champagne, no?
Yeah.
That they had put
I forget what that was. Maybe it was.
Or maybe not champagne,
but it was
maybe
very,
a mousser.
It's very exciting. It was great. And so we met them, and then we dropped down the other side, and then in fact the first time.
And you even had Doug Scott at the Valo Hut as a young climber. He cooked you something.
Yeah, they were just doing Mont Blanc by the.
They were doing the Mont Blanc.
And of course, we didn't know each other at that time, and and they cooked us some food.
Yeah, which is nice to find a youngster for you at the time, Doug.
That's right.
Huh? Yeah.
Well, I suppose. I was what? So, I would have been 28. Or was I 27? 27 then. So, and Doug Sonia, so he'd have been 20.
Yeah.
So so he was at the start of his
He was the starter.
Alpine career, and